What if the key to stopping global terror lay hidden in plain sight, in the mind of the most unlikely hero? A news report flashed across a dozen airport screens, blurring images of chaos and despair. But it was the chilling, cryptic symbol left behind that whispered of a terror unlike any seen before. The smell of ancient parchment and dust motes dancing in the morning light was the perfume of Dr. Aris Thorne's life. It clung to her tweed jacket, her perpetually ink-stained fingers, and the quiet intensity in her 34-year-old eyes. She worked at the New York Public Library's subterranean archives, a place that, like its inhabitants, was often overlooked. Each morning, Aris would carefully don her white gloves, the fabric worn from 1,000 delicate turns of a page, and lose herself in the fragile world of centuries past. She was good at her job, meticulously preserving, cataloging, and often simply understanding. No one bustling through the grand marble halls above, or complaining about their overdue fines, would ever guess that Aris could decipher forgotten languages or unravel complex mythological tapestries. "Still playing with your old books, Dr. Thorne?" Mr. Henderson, her portly supervisor, grunted, lumbering past her workstation. "Real work's piling up, you know. Digital conversions, grant reports, not dusty fairy tales." Aris merely offered a tight, polite smile, her gaze already drifting back to the faded script of a 15th-century Dante manuscript. Later that evening, in her cramped, book-filled apartment in Queens, the scent of old paper mingled with the faint aroma of Chloe's cooking. Stacks of journals leaned precariously on every surface, a testament to a life paused. "Aris, you're a genius," Chloe said, stirring a pot of pasta, her voice warm and pragmatic. "A literal, actual genius. You should be teaching, publishing, doing something more than just dusting other people's dreams." Aris ran a hand over a framed photo, a younger, more vibrant version of herself, beaming in front of the Sorbonne. 4 years ago, she had been on the cusp of completing her Ph.D. in comparative mythology, a life painted in the vibrant colors of academia. Then came the phone call. Her mother's diagnosis, the spiraling medical bills, the need to return home. Her dream dissolved overnight. Paris became a ghost, a painful whisper of a life that belonged to someone else. "It's just how things are, Chloe," Aris murmured, but the yearning in her voice was unmistakable. Meanwhile, across the country in Washington, D.C., the air in a secure, bustling newsroom hummed with a far more immediate crisis. Director Evelyn Reed, a woman whose sharp gaze could cut through any pretense, stood before a wall of monitors displaying maps, news feeds, and encrypted data. Her junior analyst, Ben Carter, looked overwhelmed, running a hand through his perpetually messy hair. "Another one, Director," Ben reported, his voice tight. "A bombing in Istanbul. Same signature, the serpent's kiss." Reed's jaw tightened. She reviewed reports of multiple, seemingly unrelated attacks across Europe and Asia, each bearing the identical, cryptic symbol. Analysts scrambled, their traditional methods of tracking, tracing, and profiling failing. "What connects them, Carter?" Reed demanded, her voice crisp and authoritative. "The targets are disparate, the methods varied. Only this symbol. And it tells us nothing." Ben shook his head. "We've run every database, cross-referenced every known terror group. It's like trying to find a pattern in static, Director. We're blind." Back in Aris's apartment, the soft glow of her reading lamp illuminated a dog-eared copy of Hesiod's Theogony. On her small television, the muted news report flickered, displaying the ominous symbol again. A faint flicker of recognition sparked in Aris's eyes. It wasn't just a symbol, it was a story. She reached for an even more obscure text, a rare 17th-century treatise on pre-Hellenic cults, its pages brittle with age. Her fingers traced an illustration of an ancient motif, eerily similar to the one on screen. "The Ouroboros, but twisted?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "A cycle of consumption, not renewal. The prophet's serpent. This isn't a new threat. It's a very old one reborn." Amidst a million voices, one quiet academic paper catches the eye of the most powerful woman in intelligence. The Data Analysis Center of the Intelligence Agency hummed with a frantic, desperate energy. Walls of monitors glowed, displaying a dizzying mosaic of global news feeds, encrypted communications, and satellite imagery. Every screen pulsed with the grim reality of a world under siege, a world baffled by the cryptic symbols left by the terrorist group, the Prophet. Ben Carter, a junior analyst with dark circles under his eyes, scrolled through a seemingly endless stream of obscure online forums, his exasperation palpable. Another fringe theory about ancient aliens, Director. This is a haystack, and we're looking for a needle that probably doesn't exist. He gestured vaguely at his screen, where a particularly dense academic paper was open. Some Dr. Aris Thorne from the New York Public Library linking a serpent motif to, get this, Sumerian creation myths. Irrelevant, obviously. Director Evelyn Reed, a woman whose presence could silence a room without a word, moved through the chaos with quiet intent. Her sharp gaze, honed by decades of sifting through noise for truth, swept across the screens. She didn't stop at Ben's desk, but a flicker of something unique in the paper's title caught her attention. Sumerian creation myths, you say? Her voice was crisp, cutting through the din. Ben looked up, surprised she'd even registered his comment. Yes, Director. Pure academic esoterica. No practical application. Reed paused, her eyes narrowing on the screen, a freeze frame on the paper's title. The Serpent in the Garden. Proto-Indo-European Echoes in Postmodern Symbolism. Keep it open, Carter, she commanded, the subtle shift in her tone hinting at a dawning, unexpected curiosity. Just in case our conventional methods continue to fail, from dusty archives to a federal summons. Her quiet life is about to shatter. Later that day, the hushed sanctity of Aris's library office was rudely interrupted. Mr. Henderson, ever the harbinger of minor annoyances, bustled in, his spectacles perched precariously on his nose. Dr. Thorne, a visitor for you. Looks official. He peered around Aris, who was carefully cataloging a newly acquired collection of 19th-century folklore. Standing in the doorway was a stern-faced federal agent, impeccably dressed, holding a sleek, unadorned black envelope. Dr. Aris Thorne? The agent asked, his voice devoid of inflection. Aris, bewildered, nodded slowly. Yes, that's me. The agent extended the envelope. You are requested to attend a classified meeting at the agency's Washington, D.C. headquarters tomorrow morning at 0800 hours. Transportation will be provided. Aris stared at the stark, official-looking envelope, her mind racing. A classified meeting? Her? This had to be a mistake. A prank, perhaps, by a disgruntled student. I don't understand, she stammered, her heart beginning to pound. What is this about? The agent's expression remained unyielding. All questions will be answered at the meeting, Dr. Thorne. Your attendance is mandatory. He turned and left as abruptly as he'd arrived, leaving behind a profound silence, punctuated only by Mr. Henderson's nosy whisper. Well, I never. What on earth have you gotten yourself into, Dr. Thorne? Aris clutched the envelope, the heavy cardstock feeling like a foreign object in her hand. Her quiet life, she realized, was about to shatter. Under pressure, the quiet librarian reveals the depth of her wasted mastery. The conference room was everything Aris had feared, stark, windowless, and cold. The air conditioning hummed, a low, unnerving drone that amplified the tension. Director Evelyn Reed sat opposite her, an unreadable expression on her face, while Ben Carter, the young analyst, fidgeted slightly beside her. Aris felt small, out of place in her rumpled tweed jacket, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Dr. Thorne, Reed began, her voice a low, calm baritone that belied the piercing intensity of her gaze. Your paper, on Sumerian symbolism. Can you elaborate on its relevance to modern applications? Ben interjected, his tone tinged with skepticism. Respectfully, Director, we're dealing with sophisticated terrorist cells, not ancient history book clubs. Aris flinched, initially intimidated. But as her gaze fell upon the projected image of the serpent symbol, her academic passion, long dormant, ignited. The symbol isn't arbitrary, she began, her voice gaining strength. It's a Proto-Indo-European archetype, a recurring motif across countless cultures. In Sumerian, Babylonian, even early Greek myths, the serpent often represents not just chaos, but a primordial force of creation, destruction, and rebirth. She leaned forward, her eyes bright. It's about cycles, renewal through cataclysm. And the specific way they've stylized it, the accompanying glyphs, it points to a specific sect, a Gnostic interpretation of the Ouroboros, the serpent devouring its own tail. Reed listened, her expression unwavering, but a subtle shift in her posture, a slight tilt of her head, betrayed a growing impression. Ben, however, simply stared, his skepticism slowly giving way to bewildered fascination. She doesn't just see symbols. She sees the story the terrorists are telling. Immediately after, Aris found herself in the agency's secure operations room, a vast space where multiple screens displayed a baffling array of new, interconnected symbols and messages. They were fragments, seemingly nonsensical, yet all bearing the Prophet's chilling signature. Reed gestured to a particularly complex sequence. These were intercepted just hours ago. They're unintelligible, even to our most advanced decryption algorithms. Ben looked on, equally stumped. Aris stepped forward, her mind now a whirlwind of ancient names and forgotten narratives. They're not meant to be read as a linear code, she announced, her voice rapid-fire with dawning understanding. They're fragments of a larger narrative, a mythic blueprint. She grabbed a marker, her hand flying across a whiteboard, sketching connections, drawing parallels. This isn't just a symbol. It's a reference to the Epic of Gilgamesh, specifically the descent into the underworld. And this glyph, paired with the serpent, it signifies the theft of the plant of immortality. The Prophet isn't just sending messages, he's weaving a story, a dark prophecy. He believes he's enacting it. Ben, previously skeptical, leaned in, his eyes wide with stunned realization. A story? So these aren't just targets, they're chapters? Aris nodded, tracing a complex pattern on the board. Precisely, and if we can read his story, we can predict his next chapter. Reed's gaze, previously unreadable, softened with a flicker of hope. She nodded slowly, a grim understanding dawning on her face. Aris wasn't just breaking a code. She was peering into the enemy's very soul. An impossible offer. A terrifying choice. Return to dust or step into the shadow war. Later that evening, in the imposing quiet of Director Reed's private office, the weight of the day pressed down on Aris. The room was grand, with dark wood and a sweeping view of the Washington, D.C. skyline, a stark contrast to her cramped Queens apartment. Reed sat across from her, a classified folder resting on the polished mahogany desk. "Dr. Thorne," she said, her voice dropping to a serious, almost intimate tone. "What you did today, it was unprecedented. You gave us hope where there was none." She pushed the folder across the desk. "We are formally offering you a highly classified position within this agency. A new, specialized unit dedicated to breaking the Prophet's code. Your expertise is indispensable." Aris stared at the folder, her heart hammering against her ribs. The words echoed Alexander Sterling's note to Esther. A new, talent should never be wasted. But this wasn't a private jet to Paris. This was a shadow war, a labyrinth of danger and secrecy. A position? She stammered, feeling overwhelmed. "But I'm a librarian. I study dead languages, not national security. Is this safe? My past, my unfinished PhD, is that relevant?" Reed's expression remained firm. "Your past is precisely what makes you invaluable. As for safety, that is our priority. But the danger is real, Dr. Thorne. The Prophet will not stop." Aris looked from the classified folder to the twinkling lights of the city outside, a world she had just helped to save, yet one that now felt impossibly distant. Fear warred with an intoxicating possibility. A purpose, a chance to finally use her wasted mastery. She was torn, suspended between the quiet dust of her old life and the terrifying, exhilarating call of a new one. Return to dust, or step into the shadow war? The choice, and its terrifying implications, was hers alone. She woke before dawn, the silence of her tiny Queens apartment heavier than usual. The classified folder, a stark black rectangle on her nightstand, seemed to pulse with a silent gravity. Chloe stirred on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, a vigilant sentinel even in sleep. Aris had spent the night wrestling with the impossibility of it all. The danger, the secrecy, the sheer audacity of the offer. But beneath the fear, a dormant fire had ignited, a chance to use the knowledge that had been gathering dust, to be more than just a curator of forgotten dreams. "You're going, aren't you?" Chloe's voice, raspy with sleep, startled her. Aris nodded, her voice a whisper. "I have to, Chloe. What if I don't? What if I'm the only one who can?" Chloe pushed herself up, her face etched with worry. "It's insane, Aris. These aren't library patrons, these are spies. Terrorists. Be careful, please." Aris hugged her friend tightly. "I will." She then moved to her small, half-empty bookshelf. Her old academic papers, her meticulously catalogued mythology texts, they would stay. She packed a single, worn canvas bag with necessities, a symbolic shedding of her old self, leaving behind the comforting weight of her scholarly world for the terrifying lightness of the unknown. Her expression, reflected in the darkened window, was resolute, anxious, but undeniably hopeful. She was stepping into the void. The black sedan that collected her was as silent as a ghost, whisking her away from the familiar grime of Queens to the gleaming, formidable steel and glass of the intelligence agency headquarters in Washington, D.C. The air inside hummed with a sterile, high-tech energy, a stark contrast to the dust-mote dance of the library. Aris felt like an artifact misplaced in a hyper-modern museum. A young man, lean and impeccably dressed, met her. Ben Carter, her assigned liaison. His handshake was firm, his smile professional, but his eyes held a subtle wariness, a hint of condescension. "Dr. Thorne," he said, leading her down a corridor of frosted glass. "Welcome to the Office of Strategic Analysis. Director Reed asked me to get you set up." He ushered her into a secure office, minimalist and sleek. Walls of monitors displayed complex data streams, holographic projections flickered, and a transparent tablet shimmered on a pristine desk. Aris blinked, feeling woefully out of place. "This is quite different," she murmured, her gaze sweeping over the alien technology. "Indeed," Ben replied, his tone smooth, almost patronizing. "We deal with cutting-edge intelligence here. Your expertise will be integrated into our existing frameworks. I'll get you started on the basic interface." Aris nodded, a knot tightening in her stomach. From dusty books to digital warfare, could a quiet scholar truly adapt to a world of spies? Lunch in the agency cafeteria was a cacophony of hushed conversations and clattering trays. Aris, feeling like a misplaced puzzle piece, found herself at a table with Ben and a few other analysts. Their eyes, sharp and assessing, occasionally flickered to her, then quickly away. "So Dr. Thorne, a woman with a severe bob cut, ventured. Ben said you're here for mythological analysis?" Her voice was laced with an almost imperceptible sneer. "Bit outside our usual scope, we typically deal with, actual threats." Another analyst chuckled. "Maybe the Prophet is actually an ancient Greek god. That'd explain why our satellite imagery isn't picking him up." Ben cleared his throat, attempting to smooth things over. "Dr. Thorne has a very unique perspective, one Director Reed finds valuable." But even his words carried a subtle, unspoken but. He leaned closer to Aris. "I understand your background is primarily theoretical, Dr. Thorne. We'll need to translate your insights into actionable intelligence, of course. It's a different kind of hard skill here." Aris merely nodded, picking at her salad. The dismissal was palpable, a chilling echo of Mr. Henderson's casual contempt for her old books. She was an outsider, a curiosity, a potential distraction. She might be the key, but first, she had to fight for a seat at the table. As night fell over Washington, Aris's office became a crucible of concentration. The sleek screens, initially intimidating, slowly began to serve her purpose. She pulled up encrypted messages, the cryptic symbols now burned into her memory. And alongside them, digital scans of her own forgotten texts, ancient maps, and obscure academic journals she'd sourced from the agency's vast databases. She worked tirelessly, the hum of the servers a low thrum against the quiet. "The serpent of chaos, the world eater," she whispered, tracing a complex glyph on a screen, then cross-referencing it with a faded illustration in a digitized medieval manuscript. Not just a symbol, a narrative, A prophecy twisted into a plan. Hours blurred into a single focused stream. The linguistic patterns, the recurring motifs, the subtle shifts in iconography, they weren't random. They pointed to a specific, deeply obscure cult, a fringe sect that believed in the cyclical destruction and rebirth of the world, drawing heavily from Mesopotamian and pre-Hellenic myths. A shiver of intellectual triumph ran through her. While the world slept, she unraveled secrets millennia old. She was finally, truly, in her element. The next morning, Aris stood before Director Reed and Ben Carter in Reed's office. A whiteboard behind her covered in a complex diagram of symbols, timelines, and mythological figures. Gone was the hesitant librarian. In her place stood a scholar radiating quiet authority. The prophet isn't just using symbols as a code, Aris explained, her voice clear and precise. He's using an entire myth as a blueprint. Specifically, the myth of Tiamat and Marduk, the primordial chaos dragon and the god who slays her to create order. Each attack corresponds to a specific stage in the Babylonian creation epic. The serpent isn't just a mark, it's a representation of Tiamat herself, and his targets are manifestations of the old gods that must be destroyed for his twisted new world to emerge. Reed listened, her expression unreadable, but her intense gaze never left Aris. Ben, however, couldn't hide his astonishment. His skepticism had dissolved, replaced by a dawning awe. A blueprint, a narrative, he muttered, tracing a line on a tablet. So he's telling a story with these attacks? Exactly, Aris confirmed. And if we understand the story, we can predict the next chapter. Reed nodded slowly, a rare, almost imperceptible flicker of approval in her eyes. You've given us something no one else could, Dr. Thorne, she said, her voice firm. Keep going. The prophet isn't just sending messages, he's telling a story, and Aris was the only one who could read it. They thought they cracked it, but the villain's mind is a maze of ancient secrets. Days blurred into a relentless cycle of digital glyphs and ancient scrolls in Aris's office. The initial breakthrough had only revealed the tip of the iceberg. Now, she and Ben Carter were hunched over a glowing screen, a whiteboard behind them a chaotic tapestry of half-erased symbols and frantic annotations. Aris's fingers flew across the keyboard, cross-referencing a newly intercepted message with a dusty tome open beside her. Ben, look! Her voice, usually soft, was sharp with exhilaration. This isn't just the myth. It's a specific, forgotten dialect of it. A regional variation from the Mesopotamian plains, used only by a splinter cult that venerated a lesser-known deity of chaos. Ben, his initial skepticism long replaced by wide-eyed admiration, leaned in, absorbing every word. A forgotten dialect? That's next level. How do we even begin to digitally parse that? He was no longer just a liaison. He was an eager apprentice, offering practical solutions to her esoteric insights. I can run a deeper linguistic algorithm, but we'll need to feed it more examples of the dialect. Do you have anything else? Aris's smile was fierce. Oh, Ben, I have everything else. She's not just breaking a code. She's uncovering the mind of a monster. The secure briefing room hummed with a low, anxious energy. Director Reed stood before a large screen displaying an intricate web of connections Aris had meticulously drawn. Aris, though visibly tired, radiated a quiet authority. The prophet isn't just using symbols, Director. He's telling a story, a dark prophecy. And his choice of myths, the specific deities he invokes, they point to a very particular ideological strain, a radicalized sect that believed in a great reset through destruction, originating from a specific region in the ancient Levant. Aris gestured to a highlighted area on a projected map, then to a series of historical texts. Furthermore, the linguistic nuances suggest a high level of academic training, specifically in Mesopotamian and early Semitic studies. This isn't a random zealot. This is an educated, deeply disturbed individual. Reed's gaze sharpened, her expression grim. Ben, cross-reference every known scholar, every radicalized academic with a background in that region, those studies. Now, Ben, already typing furiously, nodded, a look of dawning horror on his face. The dread in the room was palpable. They were no longer chasing shadows. They were closing in on a face. The monster she hunts isn't a stranger. He's a ghost from her own past. The sterile glow of the monitor was a cold mirror to Aris's shock. Late into the night, alone in her office, the intelligence report had flashed across her screen. The Prophet. The face of Dr. Elias Vance stared back at her. A younger, earnest Elias, smiling beside her in an old academic photo. Her hands trembled as she picked up the framed picture. Two hopeful scholars, brimming with shared passion for ancient lore. Elias. Brilliant, charismatic, but always with a dark edge. A fascination with the destructive aspects of mythology. He was a peer, a friend, a rival in academic debates at the Sorbonne. He had been one of the few who truly understood her. "No," she whispered, the word a ragged gasp. The headlines about the attacks, the cryptic symbols, the twisted prophecies, all suddenly coalesced into a horrifying personal betrayal. He wasn't just a terrorist. He was a ghost, from a life she thought was long buried, now returned to haunt her. The man who saw the same beauty in ancient tales as she did had twisted them into a blueprint for terror. The code is broken, but the true terror has just begun. Can she stop an ancient prophecy from becoming a modern nightmare? The next morning, the secure briefing room was filled with a palpable tension. Aris, exhausted but resolute, stood before a timeline of impending attacks, a map highlighting a major European capital. He calls himself the Prophet for a reason, Aris explained, her voice urgent, tracing connections on the screen. His entire campaign is a twisted reenactment of the Sumerian deluge myth. Each attack, a doi, wave of destruction, a doi, cleansing, ritual, culminating in a final, cataclysmic event designed to purify the modern world. The symbols, the timing, the locations, they are all meticulously mapped to this ancient narrative. Reed's jaw was set, her eyes steely. And the next wave? Aris pointed to the highlighted city. According to his prophecy, the final ritual begins in less than 24 hours. A coordinated global attack designed to usher in his new age. The air crackled with desperate urgency. Time was not merely running out, it was already a distant echo. Reed barked orders, a whirlwind of immediate action. The code was broken, but the real battle had just begun. One last symbol, one last chance. The world holds its breath. Hours before the predicted global attack, Aris was back in her office, the weight of the world pressing down on her. A final, extremely cryptic message had been intercepted. A last-minute adjustment to the Prophet's plan. A single, baffling symbol. It pulsed on the screen, mocking her. Aris ran her hands through her hair, her eyes burning. She felt the exhaustion deep in her bones, but there was no time for rest. Ben stood beside her, his face etched with worry. "Anything, Aris? Anything at all?" he urged, his voice barely a whisper. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder, each second a hammer blow against the silence. Aris muttered ancient names, forgotten legends, desperately searching for a connection, a variation, a nuance she might have missed. Countless lives, the fate of cities, hung in the balance, all dependent on her ability to solve this one last impossible riddle. What if one forgotten word, one subtle shift in an ancient tale, held the key to saving millions? In the command center, the air thrummed with a tension so thick it was a physical presence. Screens flashed red. Data streamed unintelligibly to the untrained eye, and the clock on the main display ticked down with agonizing slowness. Dr. Aris Thorne, her hair disheveled, eyes burning with a desperate intensity, stared at the final, baffling symbol on the main monitor. Ben Carter stood beside her, his face pale, while Director Evelyn Reed's jaw was set in a grim line, her gaze fixed on Aris. "It's not the serpent's coil as a symbol of eternal return," Aris whispered, her voice raw with exhaustion. Then suddenly, a spark ignited in her eyes. "It's the asterisk breaking of the coil. The myth speaks of a moment, a specific fracture point where the serpent devours itself, but not to renew, to asterisk end the cycle. The Prophet isn't signaling a new beginning, Director. He's signaling the asterisk finality of the 7th hour, at the very peak of the plaza's grand arch, where the shadow of the ancient sundial falls." She jabbed a finger at a precise spot on the digital map of the target city. That's not a location for chaos. It's a stage for a ritualistic, symbolic prude tuiles twos of time itself. Reed's eyes, sharp and calculating, locked onto the coordinates. Tactical lead. Confirm proximity to the sundial's shadow line at the 7th hour. Go, go, go! The tactical team lead, a gruff man who had initially scoffed at Aris's methods, barked into his comms. Confirmation received, Director! Teams moving to intercept at coordinates 48.8584 degrees north, 2.2945 degrees east, sundial shadow intersection, T-2 minutes. A collective breath, held for what felt like an eternity, hovered in the room. The silent war erupted in a bustling European square, a place where tourists usually jostled for photos and street artists entertained. Today, however, another kind of performance was about to unfold. Covert agency teams, indistinguishable from the crowd moments before, moved with chilling precision. One last impossible riddle. One last brilliant mind. The fate of millions hung on a forgotten word. The silent war erupted, and a librarian's wisdom saved the day. Zulu 1 moving on target. A voice crackled through Reed's earpiece, a stark counterpoint to the distant sounds of city life. The camera feed, patched through to the command center, flickered. A figure, dressed in dark robes, stood poised near an ornate fountain, his hand reaching into a satchel. Around him, several other operatives, blending into the crowd, subtly shifted their positions. Now, Reed commanded, her voice cutting through the comms. Like shadows detaching from the crowd, agents swarmed. A swift, practiced movement, a blur of motion. The robed figure, caught entirely by surprise, let out a guttural cry as he was slammed against the fountain. His satchel clattered to the ground, its contents, not a bomb, but a device meant to amplify a symbolic sonic pulse, spilling harmlessly. The other operatives were apprehended with similar speed and efficiency. The Prophet, Dr. Elias Vance himself, was among them, his face a mask of shocked disbelief, his carefully constructed ritual shattered by an unseen, unheard force. It was over. The command center erupted, not in cheers, but in a profound, almost reverent silence. The tension, which had been a suffocating weight, lifted, leaving behind a lightness that felt foreign, exhilarating. Confirmation of the successful operation and the Prophet's capture flashed across the screens, the red alerts replaced by a reassuring green. Analysts slumped in their chairs, some burying their faces in their hands, others staring blankly at the monitors, processing the enormity of what had just been averted. Director Reed turned from the main screen, her gaze finding Aris. Her usually stern face softened, a rare, genuine smile touching her lips. "Dr. Thorne," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "You did it. You broke it. You saved them all." Ben Carter, tears welling in his eyes, simply stared at Aris, a look of profound awe on his face. He had seen her at her most frustrated, her most exhausted, and now her most triumphant. Aris felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her, but beneath it, a quiet, unfamiliar warmth bloomed in her chest. She had done it. The weight of the world, for now, had been lifted. The cheers of a grateful nation, all thanks to the woman no one saw coming. Hours later, the adrenaline had receded, replaced by a cold, unsettling calm. Aris found herself in a stark, windowless interrogation room, a single table separating her from the man she had once admired, the man who had become the Prophet. Dr. Elias Vance, stripped of his robes, looked smaller, more human, yet his eyes still held a fanatical gleam. "You perverted it, Elias," Aris began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "The serpent's coil. It's a symbol of cosmic cycles, of life, death, and rebirth. You twisted it into a justification for destruction, for an ending." Vance scoffed, his gaze unwavering. "You still see fairy tales, Aris. I saw the truth. The world is sick, stagnant. It needed a cleansing fire, a return to the primordial chaos that precedes true creation. I merely accelerated the inevitable, using the ancient blueprint that you, of all people, should understand." "I understand the myths as narratives of human experience, of connection, of how we strive for meaning," Aris retorted, leaning forward. "Not as a twisted manifesto for terror, Our shared history is a tapestry, Elias, woven with threads of hope and resilience, not a roadmap to oblivion. You sought to tear it apart. I sought to understand it, to protect it. She felt a pang of sorrow, not just for the lives he nearly took, but for the brilliant mind that had fallen so far. She broke his code. Now she must break his twisted ideology. A few days later, Aris returned to her apartment in Washington, D.C., though it was no longer the cramped, book-cluttered sanctuary she'd left. The agency, with discreet efficiency, had relocated her to a much nicer, albeit still modest, space. The familiar stacks of books were neatly shelved, the air no longer thick with dust but with a sense of quiet calm. Chloe burst in, a whirlwind of relief and excitement. "Aris! Oh my God! I heard the news reports. They're calling it an unprecedented intelligence coup. They didn't mention you, of course, but I knew. You look different." Chloe's eyes, full of genuine admiration, scanned her friend. Aris no longer carried the weary slump of the overlooked. There was a quiet confidence in her posture, a subtle light in her eyes. "I am," Aris said simply, a faint smile touching her lips. She thought of the dusty archives, the condescending Mr. Henderson, the relentless cycle of her old life. She thought of Vance, his twisted logic, a dark echo of her own academic passions. She had faced true danger, confronted a personal demon, and found a courage she never knew she possessed. The world hadn't just called her back, it had reshaped her. The quiet librarian saved the world. What does she do for an encore? The quiet hum of Director Evelyn Reed's office was a stark contrast to the chaos Aris had recently navigated. A week had passed since the Prophet's capture, a blur of debriefings, hushed congratulations, and the lingering phantom of global catastrophe narrowly averted. Now, Aris sat opposite Reed's imposing desk, a heavy, leather-bound folder resting between them. "Dr. Thorne," Reed began, her voice crisp but with an unfamiliar warmth, "your contribution was singular. Without your insight, the outcome would have been catastrophic." She pushed the folder gently across the polished surface. "We've created a new department, Cultural and Symbolic Analysis. It's designed to integrate expertise like yours into our core intelligence operations. And we want you to run it." Aris's breath caught. The words hung in the air, weighted with possibility. A generous salary, resources, a team. A career that didn't just utilize her talents, but celebrated them. It was a lifeline thrown from a world she never knew existed, offering a purpose far grander than she had ever dared to dream. Her eyes scanned the formal document, the title emblazoned on the first page. Us, this Director, Cultural and Symbolic Analysis. It felt both exhilarating and utterly overwhelming. This was more than a job. It was a testament to her worth, a recognition that had eluded her for so long. The quiet librarian is offered a new life, a new purpose. But will she accept it on their terms? Aris looked at the offer, then back at Director Reed. The woman's gaze was unreadable, but Aris felt a flicker of something in her own chest. Not fear, but a surge of hard-won confidence. This was not a gift. It was a negotiation. She had saved the world. She had earned the right to define her own terms. "Director Reed," Aris began, her voice steady, "I am profoundly grateful for this opportunity, and I accept the spirit of your offer." She paused, leaning forward slightly, her posture mirroring Reed's own focused intensity. "However, I have a counter-proposal regarding the structure of this new department." Reed's eyebrow arched, a subtle hint of surprise. "I'm listening, Dr. Thorne." "I believe this department should serve as a bridge," Aris continued, her academic passion igniting, "not just an internal resource. We need to formalize academic partnerships, create external outreach programs. We need to actively recruit and mentor scholars in overlooked fields, bringing their insights into intelligence. My role wouldn't just be to lead a team, but to foster a new paradigm, one where the humanities are recognized as vital to national security. I want to build a truly interdisciplinary nexus, a hub where ancient wisdom meets modern threats." She looked at Reed, a direct, assertive challenge in her eyes. "I want to be a partner in shaping this vision, not just a prize for a job well done." She saved the world. Now she's negotiating her future. This isn't a gift. It's a partnership. Director Reed studied Aris, a long, assessing look that could have been intimidating just weeks ago. But Aris held her gaze, her newfound resolve unwavering. A slow, almost imperceptible smile touched Reed's lips, a rare sight that transformed her usually stern features. She clearly saw more than just a brilliant academic, she saw a leader. A bridge, Reed mused, her voice thoughtful, an interdisciplinary nexus. Dr. Thorne, you have a vision that extends beyond the immediate crisis. That is precisely what this agency needs. She extended her hand across the desk, her grip firm and decisive. You have a deal. Welcome to a new era of intelligence. Aris shook Reed's hand, a current of electricity passing between them. It wasn't just a professional agreement, it was a profound acknowledgement. The weight of the world, once a crushing burden, now felt like a responsibility she was ready to carry, on her own terms. She had found her voice, and with it, a path to a future she had once believed lost forever. A new hero, a new era. The librarian's voice will now shape the world. Weeks later, the hum of Aris's new office was anything but quiet. It was a vibrant symphony of intellectual curiosity and cutting-edge technology. Her new department, Cultural and Symbolic Analysis, was a testament to her vision. Ben Carter, no longer the skeptical junior analyst, was now her enthusiastic right-hand man, his screens displaying not just encrypted data, but intricate diagrams of ancient myth cycles and linguistic connections. Aris sat at the head of a sleek, transparent table, leading a diverse team of linguists, anthropologists, and tech specialists. They were dissecting a newly intercepted message, a complex tapestry of obscure folklore and modern slang. The prophet didn't just use symbols. Aris explained, her voice confident and clear. He understood the power of narrative. We need to deconstruct the story they're trying to tell, not just the words they're using. She glanced at Ben, who nodded, already cross-referencing a particular mythological reference with a recent geopolitical event. Aris smiled, a genuine, purposeful smile. She was also deep into drafting a proposal for formal academic partnerships with universities, envisioning a future where scholars and spies worked hand in hand. She wasn't just a codebreaker. She was building a new kind of intelligence. Months later, Dr. Aris Thorne stood at a podium in a bustling university lecture hall, bathed in the warm glow of the spotlight. Her tailored suit was a far cry from her old librarian's uniform, her posture confident and radiant. She captivated the audience, speaking passionately about the unexpected intersections of ancient mythology and modern conflict, the subtle ways timeless stories could echo in today's headlines. She spoke, of course, in carefully coded academic language, never revealing the true depth of her work. In the third row, Chloe watched, a wide, proud smile on her face. Her friend, the quiet, overlooked scholar who had once felt suffocated by her forgotten dreams, was now thriving. Aris was in her element, her voice resonating with authority and inspiration. She was no longer just a librarian, she was an oracle, a bridge builder, a leader. As Aris concluded her lecture, a wave of applause swept through the hall. She met Chloe's gaze, a silent nod of shared understanding passing between them. From forgotten scholar to inspiring leader, her story reminds us that true genius can be found anywhere,